You're listening to The Watchers, a show where two women from opposite ends of New Jersey watch movies and TV about moiter.
Moiter.
Have you looked at, I'm Andrea.
And I'm Jodie.
And this is the aforementioned Watchers. Did you actually look at the journals at all? Her diary? Like any other? It's spelled Moider.
I did know that because it was referenced in an article I read.
So funny. I have a lot to say about it.
We watched Heavenly Creatures.
But we did watch Heavenly Creatures.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. So 1994, New Zealand. We mentioned it last week. It's based on a true story. Directed by Peter Jackson, pre-Lord of the Rings fame.
Yeah, I think lots of people know at this point that he kind of started out as this weird kind of like surrealist sort of horror movie director, like Dead Alive is a great example. And you can kind of see that. It's funny, there's a lot of this movie almost feels like a midpoint between like Dead Alive and Lord of the Rings.
It really does. It incorporates both the horror and the fantasy like really explicitly. So as we said last week, our plan for the foreseeable future is we are going to be watching films that are directly or indirectly referenced in Yellowjackets or have really close connections to the show that we love so much. And we had to start
this
with
one
Heavenly
is both.
Creatures because
this one is everything.
It's Melanie Lynskey's first real job. It's Kate Winslet's first feature film as well, but she'd been working for a while. But it's really all about the cherubic, is that the way you say that? The 15-year-old Melanie Lynskey's like adorable little face and thick New Zealand accent.
It's so good.
It's so great.
Fantastic.
So
I just kept like repeating everything she was saying in that accent as I was watching it.
I know.
It's so delightful.
I know. I watched an interview with her this morning where she was going through some of her major roles. And they started with this one, and then they got to Yellowjackets. And the scene they showed from Yellowjackets was the Notebook Club scene. And as soon as she sees it pop up on the screen, she's like, "Oh, Jiff." Even when it's like in her real life, she refers to him as Jiff.
Jiff. Did you watch it's like the only real interview I could find of Melanie and Kate in Central Park
Oh, did I watch that? I've seen that before, actually. I've seen clips of it before.
It's so
But
sweet.
I watched the whole thing. It's adorable. I feel like we should drop in a little bit of the audio because there's a moment where the two of them are being so fucking adorable.
Do you have any obsessions?
Oh, yes, I'm obsessed with Mel. I'm obsessed with Beck.
She is.
I've been saying this in every interview just in case he happens to catch one.
Yeah,
and
say it to the camera, say Beck.
I'm looking for you.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
I love it so much.
So good.
They're so adorable riding around Central Park together. And it's like, Melanie Lynskey was 15 when she shot this movie. Kate Winslet was 19. They clearly became like immediate friends. Like
I imagine shooting a film like that, it's hard not to. I have so much about all of this to say, but it's probably hard not to. There's a moment as they're getting into the carriage where Kate says, like, to Mel, I'll always take care of you.
Yeah, she puts her arm around her.
Sweet. But then, did you see Melanie's interview later talking about losing touch with Kate?
Yeah.
Immediately, pretty much after the film.
I know. And it's like, it was really, the way she talked about it was really sort of grounded. She was like, well, this is what happened. Like, after this, she did Titanic, and she became like an international superstar and just didn't have time.
Her new best friend was Leo DiCaprio.
Right. And it's fair. Like, it's a career thing. It happens in normal people's lives too, where like, you move and you lose touch with someone that you were really close to at one point. But you can see the like love between them in this.
Well, yeah. And it's so hard not to draw the parallel. First of all, Melanie being younger and it quite possibly, I have no idea, but being her first like real intense kind of female friendship like that.
Maybe. Yeah.
And then also that the film ends with Kate Winslet leaving on a steamer ship. And then
she gets on a steamer ship in Titanic. It's so funny. It's so funny. And like, she does talk in that one of the interviews about how when she meets Kate, like, Kate's almost like an alien because she's been in the business for so long, and she's like got her headshots, and she's very professional and she's very polished, and this literally, Melanie Lynskey auditioned for this at her high school. Like, they came because they were looking for someone who really physically resembled Pauline. And they were auditioning like all over New Zealand, and they literally were auditioning just at random high schools. It seems like.
That's so cool. And I mean, I think they did a great job with the two of them. It's funny too. Again, impossible not to keep drawing these parallels. But even the way that Juliet is introduced in the film, when she walks in, they shoot her like a movie star. Like it looks like it's almost like a. There's a little bit of like a meet cute kind of like romance, maybe not romantic comedy necessarily, but.
Yeah, but she comes in and she's like the too cool for school, like, you know, rebellious person that
precocious.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've seen this picture too, but there's a side by side of the two of them, and it's so okay. We have really just kind of jumped into this. I don't think we're going to do a scene by scene breakdown.
No.
But the one thing I was just going to say is when you first meet
Pauline, Juliet. Yeah.
When you first meet Pauline,
well, they have 17 names in this. They're Gina. They're
something else I want to talk about. Deborah and Charles. And Yvonne, and there's so many different names for these two girls. But when you first meet Pauline, and she's such a little black rain cloud, she's like actively scowling, and I sort of laughed. I was like, laying it on a little thick, Melanie. But then you look at pictures of the real Pauline.
That is her face.
That's her face.
I know. Yeah, all the school pictures. There's there's that one school picture of them, and that they recreate the event of it in the movie, but everyone else is looking normally at the camera, and Pauline is like looking down and scowling in such an obvious way.
When you say recreate, I mean, that's exactly what it is. It's not exaggerated.
Not at all.
So hard not to talk delightedly about these two murderous girls. I think there should be a little disclaimer here. Where
this was a real fucking murder.
Real murder.
A brutal murder. Not just like not a crime of passion, like a pre-planned, brutal fucking murder of this girl's mom. I think we should, so just to keep us like making some sort of sense, let's do a little sort of background pre-production stuff, go through the plot, and then do all the connections. So like I said, directed by Peter Jackson, he co-wrote the screenplay with his partner, Fran Walsh. She had been interested in this case for a long time. And so it's, like I said, like we were saying, it's based on a real murder case, the Parker Hume murder case. Two teenage girls who become close friends when Juliet moves to Christchurch in New Zealand. And the events in the movie span the first meeting in 1952 through 1954 when they murder Pauline's mother, Honora. Yeah, Honora. I thought it was really interesting. They shot this film on location in Christchurch, obviously. They also shot it at the former Hume house.
Whoa.
On the grounds. I don't know that they went inside, but they shot on the grounds of Juliet's actual house.
Fascinating. And all of the journal entries are verbatim pulled from Pauline's actual journal too. So there's so much fascinating stuff with including the reality of the case, and then the really stylized, fantastical sort of like.
Well, and because they could have taken this in so many different ways. Like, this case was a huge deal in New Zealand when it happened, and there was a lot of sensationalism around the trial. And like, you could see this movie being about starting with the murder, and being about the trial, because the way the girls behaved in the trial was really notable. They were like laughing as they would leave the court together, like.
I listened to a podcast called Hollywood Crime Scene about it because I wanted to hear more about the trial.
Yeah.
And apparently at one point, did you come across this in your research? I didn't. I only heard this podcast mention it, so I don't know where they found it. But at one point, one of the girls says to the other, like the old girl, as they're leaving the trial, the old girl put up more of a fight than we thought, which is brutal. And then the policewoman who was, and I'm saying woman for a reason, it was escorting them, kind of scolded them. And Juliet said, well, aren't you the perfect little policewoman?
Wow. I did not see that. Good Lord.
Horrifying. I hate to be delighted, but man, are they an interesting couple of girls. Like, it is.
Yeah, no, I had just read that like they were whispering and laughing throughout the trial with each other, like kind of indifferent to what was actually happening. I think the other thing that So I was saying, like, they could have played up the trial and the sensationalist aspect of that. A big part of that sensationalism was the speculation about the relationship of the girls, based on what was written in the journals, mainly, but also then elaborated on in people's minds. And, like, you know, we should state outright that according to, now I'm blanking on names. There's so many names. Juliet, yes. According to
Anne
Juliet,
Perry.
yes, we'll get to that. According to Juliet, who was still alive until 2023, they did not have a romantic relationship. But
where do we talk about in this episode? Maybe this is off mic, I'm not sure. Yeah. There's so much to say about what was recorded at the time versus what Anne Perry later said versus what because it seems to me from Pauline's journals, and I think we can trust them, that even if they weren't, that there was a physical relationship, even if for Juliet it wasn't like,
it certainly seems that way.
Emotional, which is crazy. I think, to me, it feels like somebody reporting back and thinking that will make it less salacious.
No, I do think that, like, if you trust those journals, there was at least a physical relationship.
Well, there was a physical relationship and at the very least, if you trust the journals, physical relationship, intense female friendship. And we've talked here about what the line really is between romance and intense female friendship.
That there isn't really one.
Right. And
that it's like very blurry.
Again, I want to, of course we should, I feel like we should believe what Juliet has said, but I feel like we also need to believe what Pauline has said.
Yeah.
And to me,
and I think we can say that, like, we can cite what Juliet has said as her statement on the events, but then also at the same time, what is in the journal is what's in the journal.
Right.
And, like, both of them are they have just as much weight.
Mm-hmm. And so it's hard to say, it's hard to, like, read anything about this case, read these journals, watch this movie, and think that, I don't know, it just feels to me like somebody who maybe wasn't comfortable. And it was 1950.
That's what I was going to say. It was 1952 to 54. And in this real life story, Pauline's parents took her to a psychiatrist who decided that she was in a homosexual, like, romance,
I
basically.
Believe she was diagnosed with incipient homosexuality.
Oh, I wrote that down. Oh my God. Some of the language around, I mean, like,
that's not funny, but it is, like, we
could do a whole series on the way that
queerness is pathologized.
Yeah. I mean, like, this is such a much larger conversation that we are not going to be able to do justice to when talking about one movie. But, like, we do need to acknowledge that, like, homosexuality had been criminalized and was literally, like, a reason you could get put in a concentration camp by the Nazis right before this. Like, this is not a time where it's like, oh, why couldn't they just be, like, a couple? I know that people don't necessarily think that, but yeah, we just need to be clear about what time we're working in.
And that, like, it was in this case used as, like, proof of how villainous these girls were and how like unwell, but again, not insane, because that was part of what they kind of argued for in the trial. And so with all of that in mind, it makes a kind of sense that Juliet / Anne would later say, no, it wasn't homosexual. It wasn't we weren't in a queer relationship. We were two murderous young women.
Yeah. He said about this, Peter Jackson had said, the friendship was, for the most part, a rich and rewarding one, and we tried to honor that in the film. It was our intention to make a film about a friendship that went terribly wrong, which is really, it's interesting. I came across that phrasing or that framework a bunch of times, this idea of, like, a friendship that, like, built upon itself in such a toxic way that, like, it started out as something kind of lovely between two people that needed to find someone that saw them, and that it kind of, like, it was like a powder keg. Like, it just the two ingredients together just exploded. Well,
and if it weren't for the fact that we are talking about a real murder that actually happened, it would be very easy to watch this movie with it's hard. I don't want to step around this. It is hard not to empathize with these girls when you're watching this movie.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that they are two moiterers. And so
I mean, it's hard not to empathize with fucking Shauna in Yellowjackets because Melanie Lynskey is a charming human being.
Right.
Like, it's
But like the fact that is fictional makes it so much easier to feel okay doing that.
Yeah.
It's a struggle here, but it is, what we know about the girls in the movie and in real life is that they were both unwell.
Mm-hmm.
They were physically, I mean.
Yeah.
If I'm assuming everybody's watched the movie, but if you haven't,
we should for people that haven't, just kind of be clear about what was the background.
Yeah, Pauline had osteomyelitis as a young child, which is a really painful bone disease. She spent years in the hospital. She and Juliet bond over that because Juliet had I read that it was a really bad case of the flu early on before
it, damaged
TB.
her lungs. Yeah.
Yeah. All the best people have scars on their chests and legs, I think is a quote like that.
Yeah.
And her family had like a habit of sending her away to heal.
Right.
So she says she'd been away from her parents for 5 years. And in the movie, she's 14 or 15?
Yeah, she's about 15.
So from 9 or 10 until they had just been reunited.
Yeah.
Of course, these are lonely.
Very Secret Garden.
The spores.
I kept thinking about
spores.
that.
Yeah, absolutely like Secret Garden. I kept thinking Bridge to Terabithia, anything where like young children bond and build a secret world of escape because they've been so isolated and then find somebody they see themselves in, of course.
Yeah. Apparently, Fran Walsh had known about the case since she was a kid and was like fascinated by it. She said, I first came across it in the late 60s when I was 10 years old. The Sunday Times devoted 2 whole pages to the story. She said, I was struck by the description of the dark and mysterious friendship that existed between them and the uniqueness of the world they'd created for themselves. So they went back and read all these like of the moment newspaper accounts and talked about how sensationalist it was. He said, I think it was Peter Jackson that said, in the 1950s, Pauline Parker and Juliet Hume were branded as possibly the most evil people on Earth. What they had done seemed without rational explanation, and people could only assume that there was something terribly wrong with their minds. And so he wanted to create a more humane version of the story for the movie. They interviewed 17 of their former classmates and teachers from Christchurch Girls High School. They spoke to neighbors, family, friends, colleagues, like police officers, psychologists, obviously read the diary. And so they really, like, I think the reason that 30 years later, this movie actually holds up about 2 teen girls in a likely romantic relationship who like murdered one of their mothers, and it doesn't come off as sensationalist is because of all this in-depth research that was done. Like, and by every account, like from interviews with Melanie Lynskey and Kate Winslet, like Peter Jackson handled the 2 of them very delicately during this filming, especially because it was Melanie Lynskey's first acting role. Like they both talk about it as a very safe feeling experience, which I think is really the only way you can do this and have it not go terribly wrong is to have someone at the helm that is really, really conscious of the type of like the way that he wanted the story to be portrayed kind of translated into how he treated the girls he was working with, it seems like.
That makes sense.
Yeah. I also read, the same article says, the girls were so absorbed by their roles that they kept on acting as Pauline and Juliet after the filming was done, which that's a little creepy.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Has anyone seen their moms recently? I think that's most of what I have for the before of it all. The film did get nominated for an Oscar in 1995 for Best Original Screenplay. And of course, as we know, Jackson went on to he is the 5th highest grossing film director of all time.
Wow.
Like Lord of the Rings movies, man. That's like, talk about a cash cow.
Yeah.
I saw them all in the theater.
Oh, really?
On opening day. And I am not a fantasy person. I just was like surrounded by people who, and I just like, at that time, I was like, I'll just go to any movie.
That makes sense.
Especially if it's like an event.
Yeah.
And seeing those films in the theater, one of the things that sucked about watching this movie actually is like that it only exists for us unless like you try to find an old DVD of it on the Internet Archive, like the quality and watching it on a laptop, I was like, it's not going to be that big of a deal. And then all those scenes in Borovnia with like the clay figures.
It's funny because in the interview with the two of them in Central Park, you see there's some clips from the movie that are a little higher quality because obviously the package that they put together for it, they're using the actual film, not some uploaded version on.
Right.
And so it's a little better. And that's when I realized, I was like, oh yeah, we really kind of missed out.
Yeah, I really feel like it would have been so amazing to see all of those, like, and even the regular scenes, the way that he uses color in his films has always been really specific. And this pre-Lord of the Rings, there's like almost like a Technicolor, like
that's exactly Wizard
of Oz when she opens the door to Oz, and
that's exactly
it just feels like that.
Absolutely.
Like the way the color is used. So yeah, I hope that at some point I'll be able to watch this on like a 4K DVD, something or other, you know, because it definitely doesn't do it justice to watch it on your laptop. So we kind of have gone through the plot a little bit, but let's just make sure that we hit all the beats of it. You know, it's 1952, Christchurch, New Zealand. Juliet Hume moves to town. Her dad is they're a wealthy family. Her dad is he's the, what is he? I want to say chaplain, and that's not the word.
No, but
he's the head of university. He's brought in to become the head of the Canterbury University College. And so then Juliet is brought into the school system as this like shining example of like a bright young girl from a good family and lots of wealth. Pauline, we're introduced to Pauline as she is like pulling up her stocking and then hopping a fence to get to school. Her mom runs a boarding house and her dad is a fishmonger.
It is, if this weren't real life.
I know.
It all sounds so like specific in a way that feels almost, for me, for a story like this, too good to be true.
Yeah.
A boarding house and a fishmonger.
Exactly.
And both like pretty well-meaning, but a little bumbling.
Yeah.
And then to have Juliet, who, you know, knows her French better than the teacher and is so precocious, and her hair is perfect. And her parents, like you said, her dad is the head of this college, and then also went on to be part of the team that built the first like hydrogen bomb in England.
Yeah.
And then her mom being a relationship / kind of like sex therapist.
Yes.
The distinction and the difference between those two families, like of course Pauline was going to be obsessed with her.
Yeah, it's so
and her
specific.
Family.
Yeah, in the movie and in real life she kind of like becomes for a time like a part of their family a little bit. She like ingratiates herself in. I say that with hesitation because it wasn't like she like did it sort of intentionally like to get in there. It was just like, oh, I'm obsessed with this person and her family seems really lovely and she doesn't have other people living in the house with them and they can afford records. And
I related to this part of Pauline so much as a kid who came from like a kind of scraggly family. And with like, I have a couple of parents in mind who like jokingly called me they're like not jokingly is not the right word.
Yeah.
Who like, you know, kindly and, you know, called me their like adopted daughter who I called mom when I was younger. And it's so easy to be that kind of child when you're looking for that kind of stability. And not stability is not the right word for Juliet because a huge issue for her is instability. That kind of, I don't know, it's just difference.
Like power and wealth and respectability maybe.
Exactly,
like, because Pauline is clearly embarrassed of her family when Juliet comes to the house, like embarrassed of their circumstances. So I think it's also about like societal respect.
Right. And it's another kind of fantasy of like, what would it be like if this is the family I grew up with?
Right. And so they meet in school. They kind of connect over a lot of different things. One, their chronic illness. They connect over both of them having this like interest in art. They both like make these like crazy clay figures together and draw. And neither of them can take this is the part I related to. Neither of them are allowed to participate in gym class because of I don't know if I've mentioned this on mic, but I had such severe seasonal allergies that during spring I had to stay in the library when other people went out at gym class.
Hilarious.
So I needed my like, my little tuberculosis hospital experience. But like, so they become these fast friends. They're like immediately creating imaginary fantasy worlds together. They go on vacation with Juliet's family. And then during that trip, they find out that Juliet's parents are going to go away again and abandon her for like 5 months. And this is where we get our first fourth world experience, which we're going to talk about that fourth world. But this is like this fantasy world that they kind of create together. All is beautiful and she is safe. But they create together this like fantasy kingdom that they write stories about called Barovnia, about this couple, Charles and Deborah, Charles and Deborah and their son, who is constantly murdering his nannies. It's just a thing he does.
And dozens of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting how violent their fantasy world is from the beginning.
So violent. Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that if you didn't watch the film that is so, so striking is like when they're creating this fantasy world, they're also crafting these little figures out of plasticine clay that you would use in like an art class. And in the fantasies, all of the people come to life, but they're still made of plasticine clay. And it is so creepy.
It's so creepy and so cool.
Like the one guy that you first see like talking or sing, I think he's singing. When he opens his mouth, it's still clay. It's just, there's something about the way that those are animated that is so uncanny valley, Andrea?
Is it uncanny?
It's a little uncanny valley.
Yeah, I think it's a little uncanny. It's a animated figure.
Yeah. A doppelganger of sorts.
Absolutely.
It's
also
wild.
Naming each other.
Yeah. We'll get to it. Because I feel like we should just get through the plot real quick.
There's when they talk about her journal entry for the fourth world. Today, Juliet and I found the key to the fourth world. We realize now that we have had it in our possession for about 6 months, but we only realized it on the day of the death of Christ. And she goes on, and then she says, "We then realized we had the key. We now know that we are not genie as we thought. We have an extra part of our brain which can appreciate the fourth world. Only about 10 people have it. When we die, we will go to the fourth world. But meanwhile, on 2 days every year, we may use the key and look into that beautiful world, which we have been lucky enough to be allowed to know of, on this day of finding the key to the way through the clouds."
It's so specific.
It's so specific and it's so frank. And in all of I was only able to find bits and pieces of her journals, but she never talks about it like she knows they're making it up.
Yeah.
It seems like it feels really real to her.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of religious stuff underneath all of this. Like this is Easter when this happens.
Well, and swapping out, there's like a part early on where she says like they're like, we don't care about being Catholic anymore. We're making up our own religion. And they have all these saints that which I love so much. This felt so teen to me, not the saints part of it, but they've all been swapped out for movie stars and they're cutting out the pictures. It reminded me.
Make an altar out of them.
Making even the like cat. Remember when Shauna tried to be Catholic?
Oh, she loved the saints. They were so tragic.
And so it just reminded me of like cutting pictures of Leo DiCaprio out of a magazine and like, taping them up on my door. They've just, it's like, they're such teen girls, but then turned up. It's like,
well, and Juliet even says like in the fourth world, it's a heaven without Christians where music and art are celebrated. And Juliet believes she'll go there when she dies. And so like, there's all these direct references to like anti-religious sort of orthodoxy.
It is really easy to, again, if we separate out the fact that, or maybe
this
not
is a real
even,
murder.
I don't know, but it just feels like what the story could be about is, repressing young girls from expressing themselves creatively, emotionally, sexually, whatever, the negative ways that can be, the negative ways they might find to express.
Right.
Things that when allowed to explore can be really healthy.
The big kind of turning point in the movie to me is when Juliet gets tuberculosis. And as she's sent to a clinic, and because of obviously TB is contagious, Pauline, Paul, Gina, etc., is not allowed to visit her for a while. And they begin sending letters to each other as Charles and Deborah. And it's like this flurry of letter writing of these fantasy stories, but they are inhabiting the characters. It's kind of like, again, if it wasn't a real world murder story, it's like kind of romantic. Like they've created this world together, these characters, and they're play acting as them in this romantic, you know, like they're playing house.
Yes.
You know?
Absolutely.
They're talking about their child who's murdering his nannies.
Well, they even have a birth scene where she gives birth to a pillow.
To pillow, yes. I know. It is. They're like playing house.
And they take on, it feels like it's not until Juliet, I think it's Juliet is Charles, right? Or no, Juliet's Deborah.
Yeah.
It's stupid of me to think otherwise. It's not until Pauline gets to be Charles and Juliet gets to be Deborah that it seems to become even more romantic. That that kind of removes for them, my analysis, it removes from them the queerness of it, because it's not the two of them. It's a man and a woman.
Right.
They're playing
it's
house.
Charles and Deborah, exactly.
They even say in the scenes that are not explicitly sex scenes, but so obviously that's what she's talking about. She says we acted out the way the saints would make love. It's not the two of them. There's like a buffer between it, but that is what's happening.
And you can kind of understand from all of that why, given the time period and given what ended up happening, why Pauline would end up saying this wasn't a lesbian relationship, because there's so much kind of sort of
obfuscation.
Yeah, heterosexual storytelling put on top of it.
Yes.
At the same time, one of the things that happens while Juliet is in the hospital is that Pauline has a sexual relationship with a boarder.
Right.
Again, she's 15. In the film, it's pretty. The way that it is depicted it's so weirdly frank and matter of fact. And also during it, she fantasizes that she is in Barovnia.
Right.
You know, searching for Juliet / Deborah. So.
Yeah, there's so much of that too, because even the saints that they create that they are so enamored with, they're all men.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel like that they're faking that sort of enamoring or attraction. Again,
it's like worship of these male figures.
Except for poor Orson Welles.
I know. What did Orson Welles ever do?
I don't know, but
they hate
funny.
him so much.
Even they hate him so much, but then what she says, Deborah had always told me how hideous he was, and I had believed her. From his photos, he did not look too bad. Orson Welles, that's his name, and they're sort of saint, whatever. No, he's not a saint. He's is appalling. He is dreadful. I have never in my life seen anything that's so in the same category of hideousness, but I adore him. And then in parentheses, squeer, S' queer. It's queer, yeah. Queer. It's odd, but squeer.
Yeah, that's great.
And it's so funny. Even that, I'm highlighting that because, it's funny and whatever, but it's also Pauline sort of not even trusting her own. She's like, he is hideous, but I'm enamored. But Deborah said he's awful.
Right.
Their identities are so blurred.
Well, in that scene specifically that you're talking about, I think it's the same one where they're making that, they're in the outside of Juliet's house in a grove of trees with a bunch of candles lit. And they're placing pictures of these
for Yellowjackets listeners. We're gonna get to it, but there are people listening now
that are screaming Lottie's name. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, they're at a tree making an altar to these Hollywood stars, and placing those pictures around. And it's so the relationship between them is established so well in that moment, because Juliet is the one doing all the action. She's taking the pictures, she's placing them, she's saying and this is him, right? And immediately afterwards, Pauline is repeating her and saying him. And then Juliet says, and this is that. And she says that. And it's Juliet is clearly leading this religion, so to speak, and introducing Pauline to it and the rules of it and what to say and what to agree with and how to feel about it. And like, I don't say that to say, oh, that means that she was like the ringleader. This was clearly two people meeting and exploding.
We should talk about this because there's a lazy way to do this, or more obvious way, or not more often. Like, it reminded me of like The Good Son, or the way they talk about oftentimes with relationships like this, young murderers, where there are two of them, which we have a history of. Like, I'm thinking of Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold. Oftentimes it's one sort of like sad loner kid who becomes enamored with someone who is the sort of ringleader.
Yeah, like a mastermind.
And they get kind of folded up into it, and you sort of, you see how that happens. That's not really the case here. Juliet is a little more outgoing and a little more in charge, but they're both obsessed with each other.
Yeah.
And when it comes building their world together.
Yeah. And when it comes to the murder, Pauline is the one who like is kind of leading the way. That Juliet does not object. She takes part. But like, they each have a very sort of almost a leadership role. But they're not, it's not like acolyte and leader at all.
Not at
it's
all.
Two people that are sharing the power in this.
Right. But in this moment, it's Juliet for sure.
Yeah. And I think that comes from the fact that this whole fantasy world starts with Juliet's storytelling. Mm-hmm. She wants to write novels. She wants to go to Hollywood and like write screenplays and become a star.
Isn't it fascinating that she does in real life?
I know. We'll get there. We'll get to Anne Perry.
I
know. But we have to get through the story of the actual movie first.
Shocked.
I know.
Okay.
I know. It's wild. We'll get to it. Okay. So once Juliet gets out of the hospital, their relationship like even intensifies further, and their parents start to get concerned.
Well, and also Juliet's in the hospital and her parents just leave. That's the other thing, is like, yeah, of course these girls are obsessed with each other. They have no, especially Juliet.
Yeah,
she's got
but even
nobody.
Pauline, like she has a mom and dad that are trying to kind of like, they're doing their best, but they're working class. They're both busy. They have boarders in the house because they need the money. Like, it's easy to see how Pauline can kind of slip between like
she doesn't
the
even
cracks.
sleep in the house. She's at first, like she's in like a guest house or whatever.
Yeah,
like,
I know. It's actually seemed kind of like cool at first.
Oh, I would have
been so excited.
That. Yeah,
my own little guest house. Are you kidding me?
Mm-hmm. But they're totally unsupervised a lot of the time.
Yeah, but so her parents leave. Eventually, she gets out of the hospital. They come home. And the two of them become somehow even more obsessed with each other, to the point where they're like bathing together. They're like, just, it's very noticeable to the parents all of a sudden what's actually like happening. And so this is sort of when the parents have conversations with each other. Pauline gets taken to a psychiatrist that talks about how it's, she's having these like homosexual attachments.
She'll probably grow out of it.
Yeah. Sure. But then the thing that really prompts the big act is they are threatened with a separation. Mm-hmm. So Juliet's parents are going to get a divorce because Juliet's mom is sleeping with one of her patients.
Which Dr. Hume knows about.
Yeah.
They've just decided right now, until arrangements can be made, to continue as a threesome.
I know. Killed me. Absolutely killed me. But so this is the worst possible thing that could happen. And I like, man, anyone who's had a super intense female friendship that has been threatened by like the adults around them. Like, I didn't have, this is a story that means nothing to anyone, but my best friend growing up, I did not have a pseudosexual relationship with her. I did not have a crush on her. I had plenty of other crushes on friends, but
you're like, let's be clear.
Well, because it wasn't about that, but we did have a super, super intense friendship that went through these like big fights and drama and like love. And like, I spent all this time at her house. Her mom was one of the like moms that was momming me.
Right.
And it was really like, it was just one of the closest friendships I think I've ever had in a sort of not necessarily healthy way. And she was with me when I ran away from home when I was 16. And this is the trip where I went to the Liberty Bell in Pennsylvania, which I think we've talked about either on mic or off.
So funny.
But my mom decided she was a bad influence on me.
Right.
Meanwhile, it was my idea.
Right.
But I was forbidden from seeing or talking to her for 6 months. And you could not have done anything worse to me.
Right.
And like, we found a way to talk to each other.
Of course.
Because my parents were,
They weren't actually paying attention.
No, they were never there.
Right.
But like that being separated.
Totally.
At that age, like from the one person you feel like understands you in the whole world, like.
I'm not being dismissive when I say this, but like your world at that age is so much smaller too.
Yeah.
And so you can't imagine that anything like, because I thought about it too with the girls. It's like, if you hadn't murdered your mom in 5 or 6 years, which is an eternity when you're 15 years old. For me, I'm like 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
That was 2 seconds ago at this point.
Right. But yeah, they could have, there's like all of these ways that the age that they are has such a drastic and like eventually tragic impact on this because they have no power, right? Their idea first is that they're going to steal things and sell things so that they can
prostitutes.
So they can raise money to go to go overseas, which of course in my brain I'm like, oh, they're going to go to Europe. No, wait, they're going to go to America.
Yes,
they're going to go overseas to the U.S. and go to Hollywood together, right? Which of course we know is not going to happen because they're teenagers. But as soon as Pauline realizes she can't get a passport without her parents,
that's what's so funny. Is it again? That's another example of like they've got this big fantasy world build up in their heads, and also in the way the world works outside that she doesn't even occur to them that you would need your parents for a passport at 15 years old.
Well, and it also points to the wealth disparity again, because obviously Juliet has a passport.
Right. She already has one.
Yeah, her parents have been traveling, their whole lives with her and not with her.
Right, exactly. Really
but
good point.
The parents, in a seemingly fateful decision, decide because they are going to be taking Juliet to South Africa to live with her aunt, I think, because it'll be better for her health, which is the excuse they always use. They're going to let the girls spend the last 3 weeks together.
Right. To me, it felt like a kind of laziness on their part, where they're like, they're both going to be so annoying.
Yeah.
If we are honest about what's happening. So we'll say they can spend these 3 weeks together, not have to deal with it.
Yeah.
Play
and
like
they were
maybe
being really horrible to deal with. Like,
totally
hysterically crying all the time. Like,
all the hysterical crying too is also like, oh right, everything when I was a kid was the
end of the fucking world,
the end of the world. Yep. I have so many memories of me like crying in the bathroom and being like, I wonder if they can hear me out there.
Yes,
hear how sad I am right now.
Yeah,
totally,
absolutely.
Not so many memories, but more than one or two.
Yeah. No, that hysterical crying was very relatable. So they spend the last 3 weeks before Juliet's supposed to leave together at Juliet's house. They're in the bathtub together, making plans. They are acting out how the saints would make love. They are very, very close. And they are plotting the murder of Pauline's mother.
So, frankly, we practically finished our books today, and our main idea for the day was to moiter mother. It's funny, too, because moiter, the way that it's spelled, it feels like, oh, that's their way of putting some distance between the act and themselves. But then they're so frank about it otherwise. So it doesn't feel like she actually needs that distance. So I don't know. It's just kind of funny, maybe? Because they watch all these, the movies they watch. Like, I don't know. This notion is not a new one, but this time it is a definite plan, which we intend to carry out. We have worked it out carefully and are both thrilled by the idea. Naturally, we feel a trifle nervous, but the pleasure of anticipation is great.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like it's a fantasy plot that they're cooking up together, just like their fantasy world of Barovia. This is like, they're being persecuted by forces that are out of their control.
Right. They feel so justified. Peculiarly enough, I have no qualms of conscience. Or is it peculiar? We are so mad.
Yeah.
It's all been so romanticized. Even the madness of it for them feels like it makes them interesting and unique. And therefore the murder is also like interesting and unique, but not a problem.
Yeah, I wrote about this scene right like the day of. There's this whole montage almost of when they get back together for the last couple of weeks before she leaves, and they're like so happy, and they're dancing and singing, and they're crying in the bathtub together and making plans, and then the day of the murder happens, and I wrote, they both hold hands in dresses. This is like a very famous like image
that
from the
shot
movie.
Is so good.
So good.
So good.
And she says, our plan for the day is to murder mother.
No.
Moiter mother.
Thank you.
Yes. You're right. It's very matter of fact. And they talk about a rock in a stocking, which harkens back to the very first time we see Pauline as she's fastening her stocking.
Mm-hmm. Actually, we haven't talked about this. That's not the first time you see her. The movie opens at the moment after murder.
The first time we see her, like, in current time.
We should talk about that, actually, before we get to the murder. When we first see Pauline and Juliet, we already know something terrible has happened. And it's funny because they're both covered in blood. It's the moment after where they're telling somebody that Pauline's mother has had an accident. You don't see them. You're with them running through the woods back, and they're both screaming. And it is not the screams of two girls who are scared.
Yeah.
It's like exhilarated.
Right.
And if you don't know where this movie is headed, it's unsettling if you do know where it's headed, but it's just strange, and it doesn't make sense if what you think is happening is this girl's mother has had an accident and they're scared.
Would you call it uncanny?
I would call a lot of things uncanny. It's also impossible not to draw the connection to the girls in Yellowjackets running through the wilderness kind of howling. It's not quite that wild, right? But it is exhilarated in a way that
it's paralleled, like, it's we can't not talk about Yellowjackets, but like it's paralleled by, if you think about season 3, the first episode of Yellowjackets, we see them running through the woods, having their game, laughing eventually when and like celebrating, and it's this one version of the event. And then we see the brutal version of it when they are hunting Mari. And here we see them running through the woods covered in blood, and then pretty soon after they meet in the sort of like actual timeline of the movie, they're running through the woods, play acting all of these fantasies about being in this kingdom and laughing and I wrote frolic so many times. They frolic so much.
Right.
They're doing a lot of frolicking. But it's the same action and the same like verging on hysterical in different directions, but like out of control running through the woods with like this combination of like joy and hysteria and panic and all of these things kind of wrapped up together.
That scene when they're running through the woods originally, where they're like taking their clothes off, what did you make of them coming upon that farmer or whatever who seems totally
the reference that came into my head at that scene makes no fucking sense. This is so out of left field. I think it has to do with the Yellowjackets of it all. It was the video for Aerosmith's Crazy with Alicia Silverstone.
Totally.
And Liv Tyler.
Oh my God. Yeah, of course.
And them like I think they're in like a store or something. Then they're like changing clothes, and there's like a guy there, and they're like kind of laughing and poking at him about it. That is what came to my brain. I don't know what it's supposed to be in the movie, but I couldn't not make that connection for myself.
Yeah, it's interesting because the obvious thing is that man should be, I guess there are two ways, is that man should be either appalled or titillated or something, but he's so unaffected by it. And I wonder actually if what's going on there then is not the first, but the other thing of like, these girls think what they're doing is so special and unique and transgressive and whatever, but this guy sees them and is just
it's like whatever.
Yeah.
Bunch of teenage girls running around being silly. Yeah.
But anyway, so my point for going back to the beginning there is now we're getting
to see it
back to, man, such a good point to parallel this with the game in Yellowjackets. It's so,
yeah, it's like when we saw that scene the first time, in season 3. For a moment, you're not sure what's happening, whether it is a real hunt or something else. It feels like a real hunt until we realize it's a game. And in this case, it is the same scene from like slightly different angles. It's not like a different version of that, but at the same time, like it's ambiguous in the beginning what's actually happening. Like they're covered in blood, so it's not that ambiguous.
No,
but is, we're not sure if they're being chased, if something's happening to them.
Right, exactly. And it's also, you know, in Yellowjackets, what's important to sort of remember and tease out is the hunt, them playing the game, we're not sure what's going on because we have the thing that comes later, the actual hunt, but we got that first. The girls playing hide the bone don't have that parallel for themselves yet. So it is innocent. It's as innocent as it can be for these girls who have already eaten people and whatever and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Jodie, whoa, hold on.
Andrea?
Just from a storytelling craft standpoint, we're sort of saying this, but just to really put a fine point on it. In this movie, we open with the murder. They're running through the woods. We're not totally sure what happens. Then in the movie, we go into the past.
Yeah.
It's a flash. The rest of the movie is a flashback, essentially, where we get a more wholesome scene of them playing the game of running through the woods. Finally catches up to the actual murder. In Yellowjackets, we start with the murder. We're not totally sure what's going on. The rest is also, it's a flashback within a flashback, really, in that way. And then Hide the Bone is the more playful, less violent version that then catches up to. Like, even that...
This was my point, but you just stated it much more clearly.
That's what that's exactly what we were talking through, but I just want to make that very clear. It lines up so exactly.
Yeah, 100%.
That's cool.
Yeah, the structural way that this is put together is a parallel for sure. So it is the day they're going to murder their mother. They're putting the brick. So I love that Pauline doesn't just have a brick. Juliet brings a brick from her house.
Well, and then it's Pauline's stocking.
Yeah.
Juliet doesn't put a brick in a stocking. They're both complicit even in the creation of the murder weapon.
Yeah. Yeah. And so they take Pauline's mom for a walk in a garden. It's an actual like somewhat famous garden, I think, in Christchurch.
It's
New
Victoria
Zealand.
Park.
Thank you. Yeah, that's what I was looking for. They have some tea. It's like, this is the thing that's like, it takes it from being, it keeps reminding you the sort of pathological, like, planning that went into this. When you see them having tea with her mom, and the two of them are like, still just thinking about what they're about to do.
Right. It's so, even the pacing of this movie moves pretty quickly. A lot happens up until this point. And it feels to me like there are a lot of scenes. And then this is so slow.
Yeah.
And they take so much time. And the suspense, the way it builds, even down to like when they're having tea and her mom doesn't want to eat the last, I forget what it is, but like Pauline is like, no, eat it, treat yourself. It's so
treat yourself. I'm about to kill you, so who cares?
Exactly.
Yeah. It's also intercut with all of these scenes of Pauline and Juliet and the ship that they're leaving on, and it's this fantasy of the two of them getting on the ship and calling Juliet's mother Mummy, both of them, and like kissing in front of the parents and all this stuff.
And the parents are totally
fine with it. Yeah. Yeah. But then it kind of, that scene is in like a black and white sepia tone sort of color palette, and that's flipping back and forth between the sort of technicolor of the garden that they're in.
Yeah, I was thinking about that there's their real world, the fantasy world, the Barovnia or whatever, but then also this third way that what's being shot, which is, I think, their fantasy world is very real and present for them. This is like what they're imagining in their future. This sort of, and it's less, there's less color. It's a little more romanticized. It feels less real to me than the fantasy world. Yeah.
And so they're walking through the gardens. Juliet seems kind of nervous on and off this whole time. And you almost think like even though I knew that this was based on a true story and that she actually did get murdered, you kind of have a moment where you're like, is she going to back out? Because she keeps seeming nervous.
Yeah.
She does not.
No.
She does this thing that they've clearly planned, which is dropping this stone, this gem in the movie, on the ground so that the mother will lean over to pick it up so they can whack her, essentially.
Which they do.
45 times they hit her with the brick.
The actor who plays
Honora,
the way she screams.
Oh, it's horrifying.
And unlike anything I've ever heard, it's what to me, I'm like, oh, I bet that's how people really scream when they're really being murdered. I have no idea, but it's like,
it's really
so
insane.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, the number of times during this, I was like, it's just the chills from like hearing those noises.
I read that Pauline thought it would only take one hit.
Yeah.
And so in a different world,
it didn't take 45 either.
No,
That's excessive.
Exactly. So or maybe not. Who knows? I mean, it's, I guess it's hard to say. I don't know how hard it is to beat somebody to death with a brick, but it is brutal.
It's so brutal.
And I read that they had to like trade. I mean, you see it in the movie a little bit. Pauline hits her first and Juliet, but apparently they like had to trade off. One of them would get tired. It's really awful.
And one of them would hold her down.
And so it's interesting because you can imagine that Pauline thought it would take one hit. They were going to roll her down a hill, say she fell.
Yeah.
You would hope, but we know that's not what happens. That once the reality of it, when it wasn't just one hit.
And it wasn't a fantasy. It was like a real person dying in front of you.
That it would snap them, but no.
It doesn't.
They're so... And even after... Somebody asked Juliet after the trial, like, do you ever think about Pauline's mother? And Juliet says, Anne Perry said, no, I hardly knew her.
Yeah. It's like, you murdered her. You watched her die. Like,
yeah. I mean, they're obviously unwell beyond just...
Yeah.
There's a lot going on here.
Yeah.
But
they're not just gay. Kidding.
It is, but it is, and it's funny too. The murder, you could make the choice to shoot this in Borovnia, and it's clay, and
you could choose to shoot the feast scene as a Greek meal, a Greek feast, or you can show them actually eating a person.
Right. Exactly. And here they don't get to escape into the fantasy.
No, it's not a fantasy at all.
It's not even get to, because they don't seem to put off.
We don't get to.
Right. Exactly.
See it that way.
Exactly. Which is funny because they've spent this whole movie kind of endearing us. I always forget what direction it is. Are we endeared to them or are they endeared to us?
They are endeared to us.
We
find them endearing, so they are being endeared to us.
They spend the whole movie kind of like endearing these girls to us or endearing us to them. I never know. But somebody's being endeared here. Yeah. And then...
We don't understand the terms of endearment.
Wow.
Thank you so much.
Really good.
Thank you so much.
Really good.
I appreciate that. So then... we get the last sort of scene being the first scene, right? Them running through the woods. This is also intercut with these imagined scenes of the boat, but now Juliet is leaving this scene without Pauline. Pauline is on the shore.
Such a clever way of showing us what happens here, because she's screaming and crying, and it's interesting because like you can tell, even though she is crying in those scenes, what you're hearing, I think, is her in the future, like actually not in the future. That's not what I mean. It's not, the cries aren't her in the fantasy. The cries are her real world cries, not at the death of her mother, but at being actually separated from Juliet.
Right. Yeah.
It's really well done.
Yeah. It's interesting how there's a real flip in that moment from the fantasy of them leaving together to the fantasy of Juliet leaving without her. And it's happening as they're running to go tell people that, like, so supposedly their mother fell. But they come running out of the woods, and then the last scenes we really get are that fantasy scene. And then we get the screen text that
love
tells
the
us
way they end this. I think
I
it's
thought
so
it really
smart and
worked.
interesting, and it really does. Yeah, it like the real world breaking into that fantasy as they leave the woods and go back to. I mean, it's Victoria Park. They're not like out in the Canadian wilderness, 100 miles from whatever. But it is a sort of separation there. They come back to civilization and immediately, and we know we don't need to see what happens because obviously this is not going to hold up.
Right. And so we end the film with this sepia-toned version of Paul and Juliet being separated as Juliet goes off on this cruise ship to go to hit an iceberg with Leonardo DiCaprio.
And there are those stories where it's like, oh, Family Matters is the dream life that he made in his head after he shot a kid in Die Hard. It's like that. It's like Titanic is what Juliet imagined while she was in prison.
Right. And so the final scene, we see Juliet kind of pulling away on the ship with her parents, mouthing the words, "I'm sorry," to Paul, who's sobbing on the shore next to a barrel. And then the next thing we get is a text on the screen.
Just snap back into the real world.
Yeah. And it's like black screen, white text. And it says, "In the hours following Honora's murder, a police search of the Reaper house unearthed Pauline's diaries. This resulted in her immediate arrest for the murder of her mother. Juliet was arrested and charged with murder the following day." And then the next screen text says, "After Pauline's arrest, it was discovered that Honora and Herbert Reaper had never married. Pauline was therefore charged under her mother's maiden name of Parker." And then right after that, we get a few more details, one of which is, in August 1954, a plea of insanity was rejected by the jury in the Christchurch Supreme Court trial, and Pauline Parker and Juliet Hume were found guilty of murder. Too young for the death penalty, they were sent to separate prisons to be, quote, detained at Her Majesty's pleasure. They both served about 5 years. Juliet was released in November 1959 and immediately left New Zealand to join her mother overseas. Remember, a wealthy family. Pauline was released 2 weeks later, but remained in New Zealand on parole until 1965. And then the last line, "It was a condition of their release that they never meet again."
It made me a little sad.
I know. And I don't want to be sad about these two girls who killed someone's mom, but also that's kind of crazy that was part of their release terms.
Well, and I think it shows how much everybody thought their sort of madness and what was wrong with them was, and it seems like maybe not incorrectly, was their relationship.
Yeah. That they each kind of exacerbated it for the other.
Well, and as we've kind of hinted at here, Juliet went on, she changed her name to Anne Perry and became a really successful, well-known crime novelist. And her identity was only kind of found out at the release of this movie. And so it, and for everything, it seems like there's less known about Pauline, of course, but that she went and lived a religious life. She worked with horses. And I read somewhere that she was helping, special needs.
She was working with kids and horses. Yeah.
And so they both went on to live pretty respectable. Quiet. I mean, for Anne, maybe not quiet isn't quite the right word, but
yeah. She became, Pauline became a writing instructor, changed her name to Hilary Nathan, remained on probation until the mid-'80s and then disappeared. Turns out when a magazine located her, I believe when this movie came out, she had been living only 560 miles away from Anne Perry / Juliet. There's no evidence that they ever actually contacted each other.
Okay, but is there any evidence that
they didn't? No.
What do we think?
Neither of them married or had children. They both embraced Christianity after they got out of prison. So basically, Pauline never spoke to the press. Anne Perry has given some interviews since being discovered, but Pauline / Hilary Nathan never did. Her sister, Pauline's sister Wendy, basically said she is a nun in her way. She's living in solitude. She's deeply religious. She lives a very unusual existence. She hasn't got a TV or a radio. She's a devout Roman Catholic and spends much of her time in prayer. She has led a good life and is very remorseful for what she's done. That's from her sister, so who knows? But
no TV or radio, a girl who was so into the movies.
Yeah. Well, and then Anne Perry, who was Juliet.
Right.
Like you said, wrote crime novels.
Like 100 of them.
Yes. She actually have the full numbers here. She had published at the time of her death in 2023, 102 books. And they were very successful books, like detective novels. Crazy.
Fascinating.
It is so fascinating.
I hate to, again, it's funny because they talk so much in the movie and in Pauline's journals, really, about how special they are and how talented they are and how nothing can stop them. And if not for the pesky murder,
right,
it's sort of true.
Yeah, at least for Anne Perry.
Yeah, she does exactly what she'd been hoping to do all along.
She writes novels. Yeah. I will say that, so Wendy, the sister of Pauline, said, she was remorseful. She did all this, like, she lived a religious life. Anne Perry's brother, who was her personal assistant for like 22 years, after her death spoke about her, didn't before she died, but said he described her as a bit of a dark, unresponsive character. He said, I was her brother for 79 years and her personal assistant for 22, and I regard myself as being in a unique position to make a significant contribution. He says, she was a complex character and no doubt a talented writer, but there remained a streak of dishonesty and selfishness in her. She did not regard herself as being psychotic or being mad, but it was pretty clear to me looking at it. That is her brother who, like, stayed by her side as her personal assistant for 22 years.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not qualified to, nor do I want to diagnose these girls, but everything I read where it's like narcissistic personality disorder is just the way they talk about being so much better and the lack of remorse that both of them openly expressed, like almost not even realizing that they shouldn't do that.
Her brother said he noted that his sister admitted it was wrong to murder Honora Parker and accepted her prison sentence. But he said, I do not remember her at any time expressing much remorse.
No, that's exactly right. It's not like, oh, I knew it was wrong like morally. It's more like, oh, I understand that murder is illegal is what it felt like to me.
Right.
I also want to be clear. I'm always so sensitive about this stuff. It's probably annoying to people. I'm not saying that everybody with narcissistic personality disorder is a murderer. No. There is one of the shows I work on, This Changes Everything. Sarah always says, like, for this kind of thing to happen, the wiring has to be in the house. Mm-hmm. Somebody has to, like, there has to be a light bulb. Something also has to flip the switch.
Yeah.
And these girls are just a perfect example of that. Probably, it's sad to say, if they'd never met, it's
possible this wouldn't have happened. Yeah,
exactly. And I think it's likely that it wouldn't have.
Right. Well, and so that kind of takes us to some of the, at least in my brain, takes us to some of the themes that I wanted to kind of talk about that connect to Yellowjackets. And if you're a listener that's here just for the movie talk and didn't watch Yellowjackets, like, this is still going to relate to, like, the themes in the movie that we're interested in anyway, but there are connections to this show that are really clear to me.
Totally.
And so, actually, before we do that, I just want to mention, like, this movie was received really well. Mm-hmm. This was kind of a turning point for Peter Jackson. He had been known as, like, this horror director, and this really, like, Roger Ebert gave it like 3.5 stars. It got a lot of positive press. Although it also resulted in Anne Parker being kind of found. But
it is so funny because I'm like, oh, that seems unfair. But I'm like, she did
kill someone,
brutally murder someone.
Yeah.
And has been making a career off of, like, she's got
writing about murders.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not like she was hiding in some small town, like, making jam or something.
Right. Working at a writing school.
Yeah.
Religiously praying all day. Not looking at TV or listening to the radio.
Dreaming up murder stories for, like, decades.
Also, one small note here that just occurred to me. They call these the Parker-Hume cases.
Mm-hmm.
Hume cases. And you know who else gets hyphenated names?
Married people?
Married people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the murder is what connects them this way.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting. One of the cases this is often compared to is Leopold and Loeb, who murdered a 14-year-old boy in Chicago, who are two gay men. And they're not referred to as the Leopold Loeb case. They're Leopold and Loeb.
And Loeb. Right.
Yeah. But what I was thinking about when you were talking about the diagnosis and not wanting to like put things on them, the way this is often referred to is as I don't speak French. Folie de. Okay. Thank you. Which refers to like a shared psychosis or shared delusional disorder. It's not in the current DSM because they considered the criteria to be insufficient or inadequate.
Well, and the couple that's most often referred to as suffering from folie à deux is Romeo and Juliet.
Right. Yes. And so it says, this syndrome is most commonly diagnosed with the two or more individuals of concern, live in proximity, may be socially or physically isolated, have little interaction with other people.
It's like Grey Gardens, too. They're another good example.
Exactly. Yeah. And under like prevalence, it says shared delusional disorder is most commonly found in women with slightly above average IQs who are isolated from their family and who are in relationships with a dominant person who has delusions. The majority of secondary cases, people who develop the shared delusion, also meet the criteria for dependent personality disorder, which is characterized by a pervasive fear that leads them to need constant reassurance, support, and guidance. So, I mean, you can see how this really applies here. But what I thought was interesting is this idea of shared delusional disorder as it applies to Yellowjackets.
Yes.
Like, I mean, that's what's happening. They're having shared delusions in the woods. Like,
totally.
They're isolated. They're,
It fits so well. And yeah, it's not in the DSM, but also Yellowjackets is a fictional show. So it doesn't like.
And also it's not that it's not in the DSM because it's not a thing. It's like not classified as a separate entity. It is now underneath delusional disorder or other specified schizophrenia spectrum and other psychotic disorder category. Like it's a thing. It's just not
also
its own.
Probably really hard for insurance to bill one delusion for two people, so they have to separate them out, which is a lot
too
of
much paperwork.
But like genuinely, that's
Who
a
has
lot
the code for that?
But quite literally, that's a lot of what the DSM. It's mostly what the DSM is for.
Oh, I
was going to say.
Now I'm going to make a disclaimer.
Here we go.
Here's my disclaimer.
Fuck the DSM.
Fuck the DSM.
Totally, 100%.
That's my disclaimer.
Yes,
I am not citing that because I think it is like authoritative in any fucking way.
No, just here's some information that's helpful for us.
No, homosexuality was a disorder in the DSM at one point.
Yeah.
Like, fuck the DSM.
Yeah. And so I totally sidetracked us there, but I do
I'm
want
glad
that
because I wanted to say
on
that
record for both of us.
Yeah.
But point being, yeah, the girls in Yellowjackets, and I'll bet I haven't done this, but I'm sure we can sort of map. First it was Jackie is in charge and Shauna is the one sort of following, and then she loses the thing most important to her, and of course that increases, and then she becomes the sort of, you know what I mean? Like, we
have a couple of people that sort of have led the delusion at different times. Like Lottie has led it for people. People kind of come in and out of each other's influence.
Really interesting though, because Lottie has led it, but she is also one of the ones that I would be like, but she's one of the ones who really needs the sort of reassurance and has the fear, and it.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing of it is that there's more than two of them, and
it gets complicated when there's a whole team.
Exactly.
Yeah. Something else I noted that really connected it for me was the diary as evidence. Yes. Like Shauna's
with
fucking
the
diary.
Journaling.
I know. Like, we've talked about how we don't know when Shauna stopped writing her diary because we know Jeff didn't know everything that they did. But also we don't know that she didn't keep writing and just put those somewhere else or burn them. Like,
who knows?
But this like documentation of crimes in your journal, like, and also the way that in this season in particular, Shauna is writing in her journal about like the people around her and this like her perspective on what's happening, which is like they're doing this, I'm here in reality, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, you're also not here in reality. Like, so I just thought that was so diary as evidence.
Thinking about Yellowjackets structurally from a storytelling standpoint, now so close to Heavenly Creatures. And Heavenly Creatures is a sensationalized account of a real event being told with some archival, not footage, obviously, but the journals, those are verbatim. And the case we've been building for Yellowjackets all along. And if we find out that Yellowjackets, what we have seen of it, is a fictionalized version of what we haven't seen yet.
This is Peter Jackson's Yellowjackets?
This is Peter Jackson's Yellowjackets. The real account being, obviously not in our real world, but in the real world of Yellowjackets. You know?
Yeah.
Like if Yellowjackets, man, would it kind of rule if Yellowjackets ended with some black and white title cards?
Oh my God.
I kind of love that. It's listed as a direct reference in the pitch deck.
Yeah, I know. That's why we're doing it.
Fictional,
yeah.
To be clear, referenced in their pitch deck, a fictionalized account of a real event. And I'm not saying that we're going to find out the actual in our world cannibalistic teens, whatever. Right. But in the fiction of Yellowjackets,
right?
If we find out that what we've seen is the fictionalized event of a real, so just want to keep building our case there.
Yeah, I mean, when the things that you're referencing when you talk about your show are things like this, like it's not just Melanie Lynskey was in it, or it's about teenage girls. It's also
I mean, that pitch deck happened before they cast Melanie Lynskey.
Right. And it's also about like the structures you're looking at and how you're telling stories.
Yeah, it's not just murderous teens. There are lots of stories about murderous teens. They picked they picked Heavenly Creatures for a reason.
Yeah. Absolutely. Were there other sort of connections you made? I talked about just briefly the like animation thing. So when we looked at, some people were like, why do we have a talking llama that's voiced by Big Pussy? And when that was brought up, people meant like when that happened in the show, people brought up Ray Harryhausen, the famous 1960s animator, as an influence or a reference for that type of animation. And as I think I mentioned in the beginning, Peter Jackson cites him as a huge influence. And so the way that the sort of world of Barovnia comes to life with the clay figures is very in that area.
And the unicorns that are clearly just horses with horns strapped to their heads, the way that you would use like a scorpion to be a big monster, like all of that is so that. Yes.
I mean, there is some CGI in this, but a lot of it, those clay figures were like latex bodysuits, essentially, that people wore
for those actors. But that's so cool.
I know. The visual effects were handled by a company called Weta Digital, but the extras that made up the people of Barovnia were supervised by someone named Richard Taylor. And he and his team constructed more than 70 full-size latex costumes to represent the Barovnians. It's crazy. So those are just people in those suits, basically.
And that fully rules. It reminds me, too, you said Wizard of Oz for the like Technicolor of it.
Yeah.
This stuff reminded me a lot of Return to Oz, which we are just eventually going to have to watch. It comes up so often.
This movie has also had sort of an aftermath. We talked about the real world aftermath of it, but did you know that there was a Simpsons episode loosely based on it?
No, I didn't see that at all.
So there is a Simpsons episode called Lisa the Drama Queen, where Lisa makes a friend who has this rich fantasy life, and they make up a world called Aqualia.
Juliet, I'm scared. Shut your eyes, and you'll be in Aqualia. Aqualia is not real! Maybe not, but it's better than this. So the armies of the gnomes and the elves faced off on either side of the hollow, broad axes poised. With a fearsome cry, they raced towards the center of the battlefield, banners aflutter in the breeze. What comes next? A battle to determine the fate of Aqualia, but you wouldn't be interested.
I have a wide variety of interests.
I couldn't find the whole episode online, but I found that clip.
That's great.
And I mean, Lisa's friend's name is Juliet.
It's
clearly a reference.
That's really fun.
Yeah. The story is just so fascinating. Like, I can see why so many people wanted to adapt it.
Yeah, it's so rich.
I think the thing that maybe the only thing that I think we haven't really talked about that much that I feel like we should mention is just this trope of like evil lesbians.
Yeah.
Like, I don't really know how to approach this topic, but it is a long-standing sort of plot point.
There's a book by... I might drop a few links to some things that we might not have time to talk about, but if you're someone who likes to read the scholarship on... I found a few really good ones, but the one I want to talk about for this moment is from Janice Lorick. It's a book called Violent Women in Contemporary Cinema. And this chapter is called Romance and the Lesbian Couple. And it sort of argues for that Heavenly Creatures is sort of allowing for a queerness that is often denied queer women in cinema. And she says, by employing the culturally sanctioned discourse of romance, Heavenly Creatures is able to pose an alternative representation of lesbian love as wholesome and romantic rather than arcane and corrupting. What's fascinating about this film is I think you can make an argument both ways.
Yeah, because I think one of the parts of that sort of evil lesbian trope is that it's like a man-hating thing. And like they both love and hate the men in their lives. Like they hate them, clearly like vocally hate them, but also they worship them as saints. Like, well, you know.
And the thing, again, let's just talk about it as a movie as opposed to the real case for a moment, because the thing that incites the murder is not the queerness and their love. It's people trying to stop that and keep them apart.
Right.
These girls actually really flourish when they meet each other and are allowed to like build and grow together. It's not until they become threatened with separation that they turn murderous.
Yeah.
Again, in the real world, I'm not saying it's okay that they or that Pauline's mom was, deserved to be murdered. Obviously
not. No. But I do think that it in the real world, it certainly affects how their case was sensationalized. There was an article in Autostraddle about it called "Heavenly Creatures is a Queer Adolescent Nightmare."
I saw that too.
It's a good one. Yeah. And so they're comparing it to the Leopold and Loeb case, and they say, like, Paul and Juliet, Leopold and Loeb committed a horrible murder. Both actions were obviously wrong, but what strikes me in both of these cases is how their homosexuality was considered a sin alongside their murder. Morality becomes murky when your very existence is considered immoral.
Right.
When you are told you're worse, it's tempting to believe you are better. When you're told you're a sin, maybe it becomes easier to believe it and stop caring.
Right. Pauline even says in her journal, like when she's talking about when the two of them are making love like the saints, that they're like delighting in the sin of that.
Yeah.
And so if that's a sin, again, I'm not justifying murder, but in a young girl's brain who, has some other stuff going on to begin with and blah, 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 and all of the stuff we've already talked about. If you're told that loving another woman is a sin and that feels good and doesn't feel wrong.
Yeah.
It's not it is a far walk, but I can imagine for somebody like Pauline or like Juliet that it wouldn't be a far walk to say like, well, you're saying this is a sin and,
And it's that perfect stew of like teenage hormones, mental illness, like society, the perfect partner to like set off everything.
Said the word patriarchy once yet in this episode. How is that possible?
Patriarchy is implied. Patriarchy is in the subtext of everything in this.
That's true. That's a good point.
That article in Autostraddle also had a really great line that I just need to read. It says, the courtship between Paul and Juliet is delightful to watch. Paul goes from a depressed blob to an adorable little chaos monster as she soaks in Juliet's joie de vivre.
Yeah.
She does. She turns into a little chaos monster.
That's so funny.
She's very mischievous until she's a murderer.
Yeah, it's like, let these girls be little gay girls and everyone would be fine.
Yeah. Drawing dragons and horses and unicorns.
I think your drawing's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's just Pauline's first line and Melanie's line read is perfect.
I know.
All of her line reads are perfect. It's remarkable that this is her first.
I know. Like, she had done like a couple of school plays and that was it.
Right.
Which is crazy.
They're both great here, but
she also plays this sort of like disturbed but sweet appearing woman extremely well in multiple cases. And it's funny for someone who I don't presume to like know exactly how Melanie Lynskey identifies, but she is portrayed herself as a huge supporter of the queer community, but not necessarily as a member of it. For someone at that time period in the 90s to appear in more than one queer role. I mean, she's in But I'm a Cheerleader. Like,
right.
It's really kind of, there's a reason that the community has decided that she is mother. There's a fabulous clip from an interview that she did with BuzzFeed UK where she's having the interviewer explains to her what the term mother means and why Melanie is mother. It's really adorable. She's like, thank you so much for taking the time to explain that to me.
Oh, I love her.
It's so good.
Man, it's so weird. Everything I read about the film and the case, like, this is such a side note, but I'm looking at another article that I really liked, called Heavenly Creatures and the Politics of Delusion by Betty J. It's from 2005. But Betty J does write, the film neither confirms nor denies the girl's sexual relationship, refusing the easy linkage between a same-sex desire and criminality that was made by the press and the prosecution. I don't know that it neither confirms nor denies. Like, Melanie, Pauline in her journals in the movie often says, like, we went through the saints again and felt completely satisfied. Now we know what it's, to delight in sin. It's not explicit, and thank God for it. The characters are teen girls, and Melanie Lynskey is still a teenager.
15,
yeah. And so I think it's as explicitly stated as it can and should be. That didn't seem ambiguous to me. It just seemed like they weren't making it overtly sexual and like visually, and I think that was the right move, especially because their relationship is so kind of in a weird way sweet and romantic through a lot of it.
Well, and I think, I don't know, let me see if I can parse this the way that my brain is kind of like wrapping around it. I think part of it is they stuck to the journals on this stuff. They only depicted things that they had actual written accounts of. But also, I think it kind of goes back to what we were talking about with this veil of heterosexuality that was placed over it, with the worshiping the male saints and the Pauline still having a relationship with a man at the same time. Like, it's not in this movie black and white. These are lesbians. But what is, I think, explicit is that these are two young women young girls who had a sexual relationship, but that doesn't necessarily equate lesbian. And I think that's actually quite progressive for 1994.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, you can have an intimate relationship with someone of the same sex and not be a lesbian. You can be a lot of things. You can be bisexual. You can be...
You think this movie is pro-bisexuality?
I do.
Beautiful. I love that.
I do. I also think that, like, some relationships are not about gender. They're about the two people that, like, I'm not saying that gender doesn't matter. Of course it does. But I just think that, and maybe I'm giving Peter Jackson too much credit here, but I think there's a nuance in this movie about sexuality that is really unusual.
Oh, I think that's totally true. And it is what I sort of like, aside from the fact that I don't need or want to watch two teenagers have sex.
Absolutely not.
What I like about them removing the sex from it is that it does make it more difficult to connect the queerness with the violence.
Yeah.
In that way.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a good thing.
I agree.
And so, having that sort of allowance for them to have this relationship that is romantic and whether or not it's sexual is sort of separate from the murder.
Yeah.
There are so many other examples, and we don't even need to name them, of other stories where somebody's sexuality is tied up with their violence and with their darkness. And
definitely.
And so it's in that way, again, if we take out the actual murder in real life, it's sort of refreshing to see that it's not so. And maybe, like you said, we are giving Jackson a little too much credit here, but maybe not. I don't know.
Maybe, but maybe not. I mean, like, certainly all the reports of his the way he was on set with these two young women and this very sort of difficult subject, both about the sexuality part and about the murder part, like the fact that 30 years later they both talk about how safe they felt with him, like does make sense when you think about the way that this was treated so differently from what you would expect this case to be, how you would expect this case to be depicted in a movie.
Right. Although there's one other quick way to look at this, which is there's a sort of perversion to making us really like these girls and empathize with them and see them as kind of like sweet kids with active imaginations, and then make us watch them murder.
That's my favorite part of it.
Yeah, I think it rules.
I think it's great.
Is like there's the sort of horror angle to this. It's not a horror movie, but you know.
Yeah, but it's also the most, I think, like true to real life way, in a way that you can do this, because we've talked about this a million times. People aren't defined by one moment in their lives. They're more than their worst act, you know? And so it is playing with the horror of it all, because it's like, look at these sweet young girls and then watch them murder this woman. But also, like, people aren't one thing. Right. So, you know, sometimes you become a detective novelist and just write about murder for the rest of your life.
It's so
maybe
funny.
Maybe people are one thing.
And yeah, right. And like the fact that they were in prison, it seems like until they turned,
it was about 5 years.
Yeah.
And so they were like early 20s.
Was about how long they would have been apart if they hadn't murdered her. And now, if they had just, that one pesky murder really fucked things up for them.
Really fucked things up. Yep.
Any closing thoughts on Heavenly Creatures before we let folks know what we're up to next week?
Just that sometimes ADHD is good because you forget that you haven't seen things. I don't know that we were on mic when we talked about this.
We weren't. Yeah. We had the same experience with this.
Yeah. So I worked in a video store when this came out. And so I remember the trailers for it. I remember the boxes on the shelf. All of that somehow, because of my faulty memory, convinced me I had seen this movie. Mm-hmm. I have not seen this movie.
No, me either.
So this was delightful.
Maybe we should have asked this at the beginning. What did you think this movie was going to be? Like, most especially sort of tonally.
I imagined it to be much lighter in tone and much less horror focused.
Fascinating.
Yeah. I think because in my head, I am conflating it, or had been conflating it, with another movie of the time, of which I cannot think of what it is right now.
You're going to have to find out, because I would love to know.
Yeah.
I had the exact opposite. I thought, or maybe this is just a way that this is going to reveal how you and I watched the actual movie.
Yeah.
Because I thought this was a movie with much less like whimsy. I didn't remember, which is why I think I actually haven't seen it, any of the sort of fantasy elements, the like claymation, all of that. I thought it was a much more grounded, but a little more like darker and a little more, I thought it was more like psychosexual.
Right.
And it's none of those things really.
Yeah. We were both wrong.
Yeah. That's so fun.
That is fun.
And it was a real delight to watch it, to be like immediately surprised.
Oh. Yeah, 100%. And to be back with tiny baby Melanie Lynskey, that was also delightful.
Yeah, really fun.
But
I mean, again, they were both great, but really remarkable that this is her first role.
I know. So yeah, do you want to talk about what we're watching next week?
Yeah, I'm so excited.
I'm so excited.
I didn't realize sort of how much this would, in a way, connect to what we just watched, sort of.
Sort of.
It's a movie that I always want to do the ramp up. That we picked, obviously, because it is so directly referenced in the back half of season 3 of Yellowjackets. But it also has some fun, now that I hadn't thought about, but thematic tie-ins with Heavenly Creatures. And I think listeners are going to hear me say that and be like, you're crazy. What the fuck are you talking about? But we'll talk about it next week, what I'm seeing here. Anyway, 1985's The Goonies.
So I will say this is not going to be one of those movies that I think I've seen, but I haven't. I have seen Goonies probably 30 or 40 times, maybe.
Same. This is going to be a joy.
I can't wait. It has been years, but it was one of those things that, like, it's so in my blood that, like, if it comes on, I know each line as it's about to be said. So
yeah, same. So
I'm incredibly excited.
Richard Donner directed, Chris Columbus and Spielberg. It's got, the cast, Sean Astin, Josh Brolin, Corey Feldman, Martha Plimpton. Kiwi Kwan, Joey Pants.
Joey Pants.
Everybody who's anybody is in this movie. And it's also Carrie Green, Andy, which I love, again, my childhood nickname, but they spell it with a Y, which is like, not to be so gendered, but Andy with a Y is for boys. Andy with an I or an IE is for girls, and everybody knows
this is our new stance.
It's the one thing that I'm like a gender essentialist about.
Yeah.
Girls are Andy with an I.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I'm super excited. I can't wait to watch Goonies again. It's such a part of my life. You can find Goonies on HBO Max if you have a subscription to that. I'm not sure where else it is available, but it is...
Go into your basement and pull out your VHS tapes. I'll bet it's down there.
Yeah, go find your VHS tapes and your tape player and watch that.
Unless the internet is lying to me, and why would it? It seems to also be available YouTube, Amazon Prime. You can run it on Google Play, Fandango at Home, Apple TV.
Yeah, it's kind of everywhere.
It's all over.
I think the Max came up first because if you have a subscription, it's free.
That makes sense.
But the other thing I just want to mention about Goonies that connects to us is it was featured in The House From.
That's right. Yeah,
which is the documentary that we interviewed the filmmaker of.
Yeah, Tommy Avalone.
Yeah.
Friend of the pod.
Yeah. So that is your assignment for next week. Go find the ship full of gold.
Oh, what a delight. Oh, watching the trailer now and it's making my heart race. I love it
I'm so
much. It's going to be so fun.
But in the meantime, where can they find us?
We're WatchersPodNJ on Instagram. You can email us. Please do. WatchersPodNJ at Gmail.
You can find me on Instagram at Jodie_Mim, JODIE_MIM.
I'm at AQ Andrea Q. I just want to share one or two new reviews. This is from Fifi Pastrami.
That is you win, Fifi.
Just from this week from Fifi Pastrami. Shout out Fifi Pastrami.
Best name ever.
From one Jersey Devil to another. I love the way this podcast uses all of NJ's wild lore to properly contextualize the magic that is Yellowjackets. Jodie and Andrea rock. Thank you so much. And then
thanks, Fifi.
Derek GQ, which I know stands for Gantler Queen. Love this. My plane would definitely be video game related. Perhaps I would have a reveal similar to Van's, but rather than watching a movie, I'm playing a video game of my life. Part of the plane would be on fire. My mother would be there because if anyone's going to hijack my death to make it about them, it will be her.
Oh my God. That's incredible.
Teenage me will be there too. Like, shut up, Mom. Who even invited you? While I stare terrified into the camera. Also, if I may offer a critique, which you may at any time offer a critique, especially on a 5-star review. I do feel like people are harder on Teen Travis and other characters and don't give him the same grace as them. In terms of understanding why he is the way he is, let us not forget that everyone is a product of their environment. Anyway, I love you too. My ADHD brain relates so hard to Andrea's personality and humor, while Jodie reminds me of my older sister trying to steer the ship.
Oh,
perfect. Wow.
Wow, if I'm the one trying to steer the ship, we are in fucking trouble.
Derek GQ, you really do see us, though, I think.
I know.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think you and I, we do our best with Travis, but...
Yeah. I honestly love Travis. And I do feel, not to be defensive of myself, but I do feel like I definitely have said at least at one point, like he's gone through a fucking nightmare himself. But it's true that I think because he is sort of... I think he's kind of tainted by the original version of Travis that we got, where he was kind of a like typical dickish college boy that we sometimes forget that like he's been fucking through it.
Yeah.
Like,
you know what I think our maybe bigger crime is with Travis is not that we're harder on him, and maybe we are, but I think he doesn't get much airtime for us.
We don't think about him. And it's
very Don Draper.
Well, honestly, though, like the men in this show purposefully, I think, are on the sidelines. And I think that affects sometimes how we think about them. And the ones that we think about the most are the funny ones.
Yeah.
And Travis is not funny. Travis is like a character that's experiencing a trauma. And
he really does, in a lot of ways, feel the most real in this show, too.
Yeah, because we talk about like Jeff a lot because he's fucking hilarious. But yeah. No, that's
Derek,
solid point, Derek.
Oh, I have one other thing. I'm so sorry.
I'm trying to steer the ship, Andrea.
I know, but
I'm trying to steer us to the dock.
I had the absolute joy of being a guest on NJ.com's new Jersey's Best podcast, hosted by one of their food and culture writers, Jeremy Schneider, who is lovely.
A delight, yes.
So for our Jersey listeners, I'm not sure exactly when that'll be up, but I think within the next couple of weeks. So
hell yeah.
I recommend that podcast. If you are one of our New Jersey is the World listeners, that's how you found us, and you're looking for something to fill that void.
Sad void. Yeah, absolutely.
The show's not exactly the same. It's a little more structured. They record in a studio. It was really fancy. I got to see the NJ.com newsroom.
That's very cool.
Totally empty because it has been since COVID, but it was still cool to see.
Yeah.
But
that's
so
great, though.
All of that to say, I think it was all about North and South Jersey, of course. And maybe Jeremy will join us on an episode. I think folks will love him. So yeah, go check that out. If it's out this week, I'll link to it in the show notes, but go give that podcast a follow. It's great. And they're still awesome. Kind of like building their audience. So you will like that podcast if you are from New Jersey, I promise.
Yeah. And we are fans of Jeremy in this house.
That's right.
Good reviews of food, good guy.
One time he ate a 1 pound mozzarella stick.
He sure did. Yep. Okay. So that is going to do it for us.
Yes.
I am steering us home. And we will see you next week in the Goondocks.
Astoria.
In the Goondocks.
In the Goondocks, you're right.